search for missing Colorado teenager Dylan Redwine continues.
Volunteers searched through woods in La Plata County. Investigators flagged items of interest.
I don't know if somebody's hiding him or if somebody's already done something horrible to him.
He was the light of my life, and he meant everything to me.
It shows deputies executing a search warrant at the home of Dylan Redwine's father near Durango.
Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. My name's Sara Jade and on this channel we talk about true crime, unsolved cases and more. In this week's case we're going to be looking at Dylan Redwine and how he tragically lost his life after he revealed someone's sordid secrets. This case takes place in southwest Colorado in a small village called Vallecito. There was only a small population of around 500 people who lived in a small area near the bottom of the mountains. Dylan Redwine was visiting his father over the Thanksgiving weekend when tragedy struck. Mark Redwine had got married to his second wife Elaine in 1982, and over their 18 years of marriage they had two sons. Corey, their first son, was born in 1992, and their second son Dylan followed in 1999. Mark also had a son from his previous marriage, and they all lived very happily for the next 18 years, where Mark was working as a foreman for United Pipeline. However, in 2007, their once happy marriage came to an end when Elaine filed for divorce. This followed a lengthy and very unpleasant divorce and custody hearing, with Elaine finally getting custody of the two boys in 2012. Once she got custody of the boys, she moved them down to Colorado Springs, and that was where they were currently living. Mark, however, was awarded court-ordered visits, and his son would go down and see him a couple times a year and go on little holidays with him during the year. So in November 2012, Dylan was 13 at the time, was going down to visit his father for Thanksgiving weekend. Dylan was described as a very sweet and funny boy who cared about everyone and their feelings. Went to the airport on the 18th of November, giving his mum a hug before he boarded his plane. Little did she know that this was the last time she was going to see him. When Dylan landed, he met his dad at the airport and they went to run some errands. They first went to Walmart and then they stopped off at McDonald's before driving home. His father reported how they threw a ball around, watched a film, and then called it a night around 9:30. Dylan stayed up a little bit later to speak to a couple of friends about meeting up the next day before he went to bed. The next morning, Mark went into work about 5:45. He went into his office and then went to visit his attorney. He'd left Dylan asleep on the sofa, but tried to call him a couple of times during the day, but couldn't get hold of him. When he got home about 11:30, he found an empty cereal bowl in the sink and the TV was on, but Dylan was nowhere to be seen. He thought that maybe he'd just gone to see his friends and go fishing, so he looked around the house for his fishing rod, and when he couldn't find it, he decided to go for a nap. He slept for about 45 minutes, and when he woke up, Dylan still wasn't there, so he decided to go and visit his friend Tristan to see if he was still there. However, when he got there, Tristan said he never turned up that day and hadn't seen him or heard from him at all. He decided to call round to a few of his friends to see if he'd gone there. However, when no one heard from him, he was getting a bit worried. He decided to call his ex-wife Elaine and ask her if she had heard from him. When she said she hadn't heard from him at all, he said, "Don't worry, he's probably just with a friend and I'll let you know what's happening." After the call, Elaine got very distraught and decided to go home, pack a bag and get in the car with her new husband and her son Corey and drive down to Mark's house. Meanwhile, the police started a massive manhunt across the area, believing he could be in the Rocky Mountains. The local community joined in the search, checking all the surrounding mountain areas. They called in their local dive teams to check the local lakes as well. Sadly, after 7 months, there was still no sign of Dylan or what happened to him. During this time, the story became national news, as his father Mark and his mother Elaine both went on Dr. Phil and were blaming each other for his disappearance. His mum Elaine believed that Mark had something to do with it, and Mark believed that he had run away to get away from his mum. His mum even filed a wrongful death suit against Mark when she felt there was no progress in the case. Unfortunately, just a few months later, in June 2013, a few miles away from Mark's house, on a road that is usually closed for the winter, Dylan's partial body parts were found. The body was found without a head, and the case was deemed a homicide. It would take them another 2 years to find his skull, which was found by a pair of hikers just 5 miles away from the first findings in the Colorado mountains. When processing the skull, they found further evidence that Dylan was killed. They found evidence of blunt force trauma from a fracture above his left eye. They also found 2 small markings on the skull that were consistent with tool marks from a knife. During this time, the police had become quite suspicious of his dad and thought maybe there was some truth in Elaine's suspicions. The first suspicions came during the search for Dylan. They couldn't understand how a father who couldn't get hold of his son all day could go for a nap. They also found that he was quite calm during the search, and while the whole community was out looking for his son, he seemed quite disinterested and would just stay at home. He even went as far as turning all the lights off in his house around 11:30 that night. Some people found this weird, as if Dylan was in the woods, it would be his beacon of light to come home. After their suspicions, they also decided to go back to the house and complete a full forensic search of the property. And while processing the scene, they found multiple spots of Dylan's blood on the sofa, coffee table, the floor beneath the rug, and another chair in the living room. They also brought in cadaver dogs to search the area, and they were able to detect remains near the washing machine, in Mark's pickup truck, and the clothes that he was wearing when he disappeared. Mark's girlfriend at the time had said that Dylan had cut his finger the year before, and that was probably why the blood was around the house. They later found out that the house had been refurbished just a few months before. However, at the time before he was found, they had no body and no motive of why Mark would want to kill his son. This is when they decided to look into their relationship a little bit further.
We were inseparable. I mean, anywhere I was, he was right there beside me. You know, he would come to me before he would go to his mom. You know, I think in many ways that was part of the problems that developed in our relationship, was because while she was out earning a career, it was very difficult for her to lose sight of the fact that she wasn't there bonding with Dylan the way I was. And I think that that was a huge problem for her. And I think that that has been a problem for her for a long time now.
It turns out that Mark and Dylan's relationship wasn't as close as Mark had made out. His visits to his father were court-ordered visits, and he didn't actually want to go. But if he didn't go, he would get in trouble with the courts. It later came to light that Dylan went as far as speaking to Elaine's attorney to see if there was any way he could get out of these visits. His brother Corey, who was 20 at the time and was over 18, was not obliged to go and see his father. So following his strained relationship with his father, he decided not to go to Thanksgiving, but Dylan was not so lucky. After checking his phone records, they also found that Dylan had tried to stay at one of his friend's house that night, but his father had put a stop to it. He'd also tried to visit one of his friends next morning, just to spend as much time away from his father as he could. But what had changed? Why has their relationship with their father become so sour? It turns out, in 2005, Elaine had actually taken a restraining order against Mark, and claiming he posed a credible threat, that an imminent danger existed for their life and health of Dylan and Corey. There was also past incidents of alleged assaults and alcohol-related domestic abuse. Mark and Corey had witnessed a fight between both of their parents, where Mark got very angry and they started to see another side of him they didn't like. Things got even worse when Dylan and Corey took a road trip with their father in 2011. While Mark was sleeping, Dylan had borrowed his computer, and while having a look, he found something that was quite disturbing. He woke up his brother Corey, and they both went into the bathroom and locked the door. He then proceeded to show his brother what was on the computer. This is where they found pictures of their father dressed up in ladies' underwear and wearing a nappy. Things got even worse when they found pictures of Mark eating feces out of a nappy. Dylan found the pictures unbearable, but Corey took pictures on his phone as a backup. They kept the secret from their dad, but it tainted the already strained relationship that they had with their father. Dylan started to pull away from his father, and over that last year, he hadn't seen him very much. About a year later, Dylan had gone on another trip with his father, without Corey. They got into a huge fight, as Mark had said that his mum and Corey were a bad influence on him. After the fight, Dylan texted his brother Corey and said, "Can you send me the poop pictures of father, as I want to show him what he's really like, as he's trying to tell me that you're a bad influence. But I want to show him who he really was." However, as Dylan was on his own with his father, and Corey didn't want to cause any more arguments between them, Corey decided not to send his brother the pictures. But the next day, he did send them to his father. However, Mark said they were photoshopped, and all he was trying to do was cause arguments between him and Dylan. That was the last time that Mark had seen Dylan before he flew over to see him on Thanksgiving, and the police believed that they got into a huge argument about the pictures, and Mark finally snapped and killed his son. The police also found that electronic communication from Dylan also abruptly stopped around 9:37. This was around the time that Mark supposedly was with Dylan, and he also didn't turn up to his friend's house the next morning. They'd also brought Mark in during their investigations, and he failed his first polygraph refused to take a second one, and then stopped talking to the police altogether. They also noted that he changed some of the details that he'd given. In his first interview, he said Dylan had never hurt himself. However, in the second one, he said that Dylan had smacked his mouth while playing football and spat blood out everywhere around the house. So after a lengthy investigation, which spanned over 5 years, they eventually arrested Mark in 2017 in Washington, where he was working as a truck driver.
There's a passenger. Just keep your hands up, buddy. Just keep your hands up.
Volleyball, watch the cab.
I got the cab. Around me. Go around back. Yep. Just keep your hands up.
Don't move, bud, okay? Do not move. Drop a cigarette.
You guys can, you'll explain to me what's going on?
Yes, sir. Is your name Mark?
Yes, it is.
Mark, do you have any weapons on you, sir?
No, sir, I do not.
Rolling my way?
Yeah.
Just gotta check you, okay, Mark?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Rolling that way.
Yeah.
You gotta check that side?
Yeah.
Here's my wallet in that pocket.
Just the wallet.
All right. You're gonna turn towards me and sit on your thumb, all right? All right. So go ahead and bend this knee in. There you go. Okay.
Are you Mark?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm the sergeant. Did you say you asked to speak with me?
Well, I was asking a few questions. First of all, I'm trying to understand what exactly is going on.
Okay. Yeah, having those rights in mind, the reason why you're in handcuffs right now is because we received a call from an agency in Colorado. You know, is it Washington County or is it?
La Plata County, maybe?
Okay. And what had happened is they had got information that you were potentially up here, and they said that they had a warrant for murder second for you.
I have no clue what that's regarding.
I'm sorry?
I have no idea what that's about.
Okay.
He was charged with second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death, and his bail was set for $1 million. During the trial, his first ex-wife had said how Mark had told her if he'd ever killed someone, he would hide their body over the mountains. He'd also threatened her during their divorce, saying they were going to kill his son during the custody battle. The prosecution put forward the case that Mark had killed Dylan when he got enraged after seeing the photos, and he killed him in a fit of rage. He then sanitised the crime scene, hid Dylan's body in the woods, removing his head so he couldn't be identified, and then went home and had a nap before reporting his son missing. Mark pleaded not guilty, saying that his son had run away that morning and probably got eaten by a mountain lion or a bear. However, a bear expert was brought into the court to show the hibernation patterns of a bear and the likelihood of an attack, and it's proved it was very unlikely that it was killed by a bear. So less than an afternoon of deliberations, the jury finally came back and found Mark guilty of killing his son Dylan.
Based upon the jury verdicts in this case, I'm going to enter judgment of conviction to murder in the second degree and child abuse, acting in an annoying or reckless manner, resulting in death.
In October 2021, after hearing witness statements from his two sons and Dylan's mum, Elaine,
I think about our differences and how I could have also been in the same position as Dylan. While my kids will never meet Dylan or their real grandfather, I often think of what I could have done differently as the older brother who was also raised in fear. See, I can't change the hate in Mark's heart, and I can't blame myself for his mistakes. I can only learn from them. I can't bring Dylan back. I can only remember him. I can't talk to Dylan, so I pray to him. And I can't see Dylan, so I dream of him. Mark may have physically taken him, and I can't change that. But what I can do is tell the world how a 13-year-old young man stood up to his then 50-year-old father and said all the things I regret never saying. Dylan is my hero and became more of a man in 13 years than Mark has in 60. I'm so proud of Dylan and what he stood for. I'm sorry for the beautiful woman who will never share his love and for the people who will never share his common love for all. It inspires me that Dylan's actions over the course of his life are what will be remembered and not Mark's words and his lies. Dylan's name will run through our family forever, and his stories will be shared by all.
Mark was sentenced to 48 years for second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death, and 5 years of probation at the age of 60. In his final thoughts, the judge remarked that he had trouble remembering a criminal defendant that showed an utter lack of remorse.
After all this time and listening to what occurred here in this trial, in this courtroom, you still take absolutely no responsibility for what you did to Dylan. I have trouble remembering a convicted criminal defendant that has shown such an utter lack of remorse for his criminal behavior.
Mark still claims his innocence and has started the process of appeals.
And this is a quote from what you wrote. Innocent of all charges, miscarriage of justice, fake conviction, sham trial.
Elaine, however, wants to now remember the memories she had with her son and the bright light that he brought to everyone in this short time on this earth. So that's the end of this week's case. Let me know your thoughts below and what you think really happened. Thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.
You call me a saint, but you know I'm a stranger, a willing and able.